Pre-1980, the market looked like this. The patient got sick. He went to the physician who wrote a prescription. And when I mean wrote a prescription, he had a little pad and he wrote that prescription out. And the patient hand carried it to the pharmacy. The pharmacy filled it and the insurer paid for it. It was a kinder, gentler marketplace at that point. But as we got later on, there became a number as we got to pharmacy benefit managers, managed care plans, and things like that. There became a lot of barriers between the physician and the patient, the payer and the physician, the patient and the payer, and then the pharmacy gets caught in the middle. Now, interestingly enough, as these things started going into place in the early 80s, the pharmaceutical industry kept doing business as they had since the early 1900s. And it was an industry that didn't make much news at that time. So it was kind of like almost a cottage industry. The strategies were a search for blockbuster products. Blockbuster products, a product that sells more than $1 million a year. So that led to large and diverse R&D organizations, active in-licensing organizations, and mega marketing and sales organizations and budgets. It led to a consolidation of industry, of companies, and we talked about how they funded research, or they funded discovery products. That's where this money came from. So leading up to 2007, between 1995 and 2008, R&D costs grew at an annual rate in excess of 30% a year. The FDA new chemical entity approvals dropped from 47 in 1995 to 18 in 2007. Annual prescription growth went from 12% to just under 2%. And heightened competition required larger marketing and sales staffs and promotional budgets, and industry consolidation created mega companies. Now, what do I mean by these mega companies? We know Pfizer, right? In 1953, they bought a company called Rohrig. In 2002, they bought Warner Lambert, which had purchased Parke Davis 20 years before that. In 2002, they bought Pharmacia, which had combined with Upjohn and purchased Cyril. And in 2009, they bought Wyeth, which had merged with Heirs to be called American Home Products in the early 2000s, A.H. Robbins in 1988, and Letterly Labs in 1994. So you can see that all of these companies had R&D sites, they had sales and marketing sites, and now what do you do? So what do you do with them? In fact, one of the things for us old pharma guys to do when we get together is talk about companies like this that no longer exist. So they faced kind of what was known as the perfect storm. Years of diminishing return on both R&D and marketing, bloated R&D organizations, outmoded strategies for product development and marketing, and then they were facing what became known as the product cliff, the patent cliff. Do you know what that was? Well, that is between 2013 and 2016. products that totaled about $50 billion a year in sales went off patent. So they became eligible for generic competition. So we had all of this happening. And oh, by the way, we start talking a lot about healthcare costs as we get into the 2000s. Now, we do that because in 2024, again, the latest figures we have, that is $4.8 trillion. And I put all those zeros on there so you can see what $1 trillion look like. Okay? Now, interestingly enough, as you look at prescription drugs, which is the blue area right here, has been somewhere between about 10 and 13% of that total, and that's been fairly common since the 1960s. But the thing that drives this is that in 1980, the total cost of our healthcare was $234 billion. And that represented about 4% of our gross national product. In 2000, and that should be 24, that's $4.8 trillion, and it's a little over 16% of the gross domestic product. So yeah, it's something that we have to do. But you can also see that if we just attack pharmaceuticals, that's a pretty small part of it. So we had the perfect storm, all of this happening. And in 2008, the economic situation exposed a pharmaceutical industry business model that was broken. It no longer worked. What worked 20 years ago no longer works now. So what did the companies do? Well, between 2007 and 2012, pharma and biotech lost about 500,000 jobs. Now, to put that in perspective, during that same period, the U.S. automobile industry lost about 250,000 jobs. And the U.S. government bailed out Chrysler and General Motors. And you didn't hear any talk about a bailout for Pfizer or Merck or any of those companies, did you? And unlike the past, the turndown went across the board, so including the areas of R&D. But overall, industry employment was down just under 6%. How is that possible? How is that possible? We lost all those jobs, and yet the employment's down only 6%. And the reason is most of those job losses were with the big companies. Remember the mega companies like I showed you. These are new startups, young companies, smaller companies that maintain the hiring throughout that period. So what did the industry do? Well, first and foremost, they downsized. They switched strategies from that blockbuster strategy that we talked about to a market opportunity strategy. They initiated strategies to reduce both R&D and marketing costs, and they adopted a priority for acquiring technologies over companies. And they prioritized the development of biologics over small molecules. So now as we move into the present day, the development of biologics has far outpaced small molecule development. Increased collaboration between industry and academic labs. And nowhere is that more evident than in the development of the Moderna vaccines, Spikevax. Explosion of cell and gene therapy technologies, and especially in the areas of oncology, and then focus on infectious disease and vaccine, particularly 2020 and beyond. So, what's going to happen going forward? The development of new technologies will continue to drive industry hiring. As long as companies are innovative, they will continue to hire. Management opportunities and strategies to hire and manage remote workforces. This is an interesting thing. Remote workforces really blossomed during the pandemic. Now they've kind of pulled back and we're trying to figure out how to manage it. And there's increased badging and credential programs. Companies have figured out they really may not need people with 4-year degrees all the time, and it's greater opportunities for STEM graduates.